I get it. When you're about to spend a decent chunk of money on a network switch, the last thing you want is to end up with a box that sits half-filled and never really gets used. You've probably already looked at a few listings, maybe even watched a couple of quick unboxings, and you're left wondering whether this 12-port NETGEAR model is actually the sweet spot for a home office that's starting to look like a small business, or if you'd be better off with a cheaper 8-port gigabit or a pricier 24-port data center grade unit. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's walk through what matters day to day, not just the headline numbers, so you can decide if this switch is worth the spend for your setup. First off, the biggest question most people have is, do I really need all those multi-gig ports? The XS512EM gives you 12 ports that can run anywhere from 1 gigabit per second up to 10 gigabits per second on the same copper line, and 2 SFP Plus slots that can be used for either 1 gigabit per second or 10 gigabits per second fiber. If you've got a handful of devices that already support 2.5 gigabits per second or 5 Gbps like newer NAS enclosures, a high-end desktop with a 2.5 GBE NIC, or a 10 gigabits per second capable workstation, those ports let you squeeze extra bandwidth without having to buy separate adapters. In a typical home lab scenario I've seen, the user hooks a 10 gigabits per second link from their router or firewall into one of the SFP Plus slots, then runs 2 or 3 10 gigabits per second connections to storage devices, while the remaining ports serve standard 1 gigabit per second workstations, printers, and IoT gear. The flexibility means you can start small and upgrade individual links later without swapping the whole switch. Now, the easy smart managed software is where NETGEAR tries to strike a balance between a plain plug-and-play unmanaged box and a full-blown Cisco-style stack. The interface is web-based and walks you through basic VLAN creation, link aggregation, and QoS priority rules. It's not as deep as an enterprise-grade OS, but for most small office setups that want to segment a guest Wi-Fi VLAN from the main office LAN, or to give a media server a higher priority during video conferences, it does the job without a steep learning curve. I've actually set up a guest VLAN on this model in under 10 minutes. You just enable the VLAN, assign the ports you want to keep isolated, and the switch handles the tagging automatically. If you're comfortable with a few clicks and don't need advanced routing or L3 features, this is a sweet spot. One practical strength that often goes unnoticed is the energy-efficient design. The switch complies with IEEE 802.3 AZ, which means it can downclock idle ports to save power. In a real-world office where many devices are only active a few hours a day, the power draw drops noticeably compared to older 10 gigabits per second switches that run at full speed all the time. Over a month, that can shave a couple of dollars off your electricity bill. Not a huge figure, but it adds up if you're stacking multiple switches. Quiet operation is another hidden perk. Unlike some older 10 gigabits per second units that hum loudly because of aggressive cooling fans, the XS512EM runs almost silently thanks to its passive heatsink design and a low-speed fan that only kicks in when the chassis temperature climbs above a modest threshold. If you're placing it on a desk or a wall mount in a conference room, the lack of noise won't be a distraction during calls. That said, there are a couple of trade-offs that matter once the unit is out of the box. The first is the shared nature of the two SFP Plus ports. Both ports share the same 10 gigabits per second upstream bandwidth, so if you try to run two full-speed 10 gigabits per second links simultaneously, say, a fiber uplink to your router and a 10 gigabits per second connection to a storage array, you'll end up bottlenecked at about 10 gigabits per second total. For most home lab users that's fine because you rarely max out both links at the same time, but a small IT department that needs simultaneous 10 gigabits per second uplinks might find this limiting. Another practical limitation is the lack of stacking. If you ever plan to expand beyond 12 ports, you'll need to add a second switch and manage them as separate devices. NETGEAR does not provide a native stacking protocol for the Easy Smart line, so you'll be stuck with either a larger unmanaged switch or stepping up to a more expensive Smart Managed Pro series that supports stacking. In practice, that means you have to think ahead. If you anticipate more than a dozen high-speed devices in the next year or two, you might be better off looking at a 24-port option now rather than trying to piece together multiple 12-port units later. Who should buy this? If you're a freelance video editor, a photographer who backs up raw files to a NAS, or a tech hobbyist who likes to tinker with multiple 2.5 gigabits per second or 10 gigabits per second devices, the XS512EM gives you just enough headroom without forcing you into an enterprise-grade price tag. It's also a solid fit for a small home office that wants to separate work traffic from a guest Wi-Fi.